Summers at Crystal Lake were always magical. The sun would set late, casting a golden glow over the water, and the scent of pine and fresh earth filled the air. My family had a cabin there, nestled among the trees, where we would spend every summer. It was a tradition I cherished, and this summer was no different, except it would be my last before heading off to college. I arrived at the cabin in early July, eager for a season of relaxation and adventure. My parents had gone to town for supplies, leaving me to settle in. As I unpacked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different this year. The air felt thicker, and the silence of the forest seemed more pronounced, almost oppressive. That evening I decided to go for a swim to clear my head. The water was cool and inviting, and I swam out to the center of the lake. As I floated on my back, gazing up at the twilight sky, I heard a soft, melodic singing. It was hauntingly beautiful, and I found myself drifting toward the sound. I reached the far end of the lake, where an old, abandoned boathouse stood. It had been there for as long as I could remember, a relic of a bygone era. The singing seemed to be coming from inside. I climbed out of the water and approached the boathouse. The door creaked open, revealing a dusty, cobweb-laden interior. The singing stopped abruptly as I stepped inside, replaced by an eerie silence. The air was thick with the scent of decay and mildew. I called out, but my voice echoed back, unanswered. Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine, and I turned to leave, only to find the door had swung shut on its own. Panic set in as I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The windows, too, were stuck. I was trapped. The only light came from a small, grimy window near the ceiling. As I looked around for another way out, I noticed a large, ornate mirror on the far wall. It seemed out of place in the dilapidated boathouse, its surface strangely clean and reflective. Drawn to the mirror, I approached it cautiously. My reflection stared back at me, but something was off. My eyes looked distant, almost hollow. As I reached out to touch the glass, the image rippled and changed. Instead of my own reflection, I saw a young woman in an old-fashioned dress, her eyes wide with fear. She seemed to be trapped behind the glass, pounding silently on the surface as if begging for help. I stumbled back in shock, and the image disappeared, replaced by my own bewildered face. The door behind me creaked open, and I turned to see a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. It was a woman, her form translucent and shimmering like a mirage. She looked at me with sad, pleading eyes and whispered, "Help me." Before I could react, she vanished, and the door slammed shut again. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of what I had just seen. I knew I needed to get out of there, but my mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Gathering my courage, I took a deep breath and approached the mirror again. This time I was determined to find answers. I placed my hand on the cool glass, and the surface rippled once more. The woman reappeared, her eyes filled with desperation. She mouthed something I couldn't understand, and then the mirror grew cold under my touch. Suddenly, I was pulled into a vision, a flash of the past. I saw the boathouse as it once was, vibrant and alive. The young woman from the mirror was there, laughing and playing by the water's edge. But then, darkness fell. The boathouse grew silent and eerie, just as I had found it. The woman was being chased by a shadowy figure, her laughter replaced by screams. She ran to the mirror seeking refuge, but the figure caught up with her, and she was trapped within its glassy surface. The vision ended as abruptly as it had begun, and I was back in the present, my hand still on the mirror. The woman's face had changed. It was no longer filled with fear, but with a plea for release. I knew then that I had to help her, but I had no idea how. Just as I was about to give up, the door behind me creaked open again, and the ghostly woman reappeared. This time, she held out her hand, and I understood. I reached out and touched her fingers. They were cold and insubstantial, but as our hands met, the mirror shattered, sending shards of glass flying. The woman smiled, her form growing more solid. "Thank you," she whispered. and then she faded away, leaving me alone in the now silent boathouse. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a sense of peace. I managed to open the door and stepped outside. The cool night air, a welcome relief. I looked back at the boathouse, its reflection shimmering on the lake's surface. It seemed less foreboding now, almost serene. As I walked back to the cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had witnessed something extraordinary, something beyond the realm of the ordinary. My parents returned later that night, and I told them everything. They listened, their faces a mix of concern and disbelief. But they didn't dismiss my story. The rest of the summer passed uneventfully, but the memory of that night stayed with me. I often wondered about the woman in the mirror and the dark figure that had trapped her. Had I truly freed her, or was she still bound to the lake in some way? The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the field as my friends and I pitched our tents near the old, abandoned house. It was the perfect setting for a summer adventure, isolated, mysterious. We were a group of 5, myself, Sarah, Mike, Lisa, and Tom. We had been friends since high school, and this camping trip was our way of reconnecting before life pulled us in different directions. The house stood a few yards away, its wooden frame barely holding together. The paint was peeling, and the windows were dark, giving it a sinister appearance. Local legends spoke of a horrific massacre that occurred here decades ago, but we dismissed it as just that, a legend. As the darkness enveloped us, we gathered around the campfire, the warmth and light creating a small bubble of comfort against the unknown. "Who's up for a ghost story?" Mike asked, a mischievous grin on his face. He always loved scaring us, but tonight it felt different. The atmosphere was charged, as if the very air around us was alive with whispers. "Come on, Mike, don't start with that," Lisa protested, but her voice lacked conviction. We all felt it, the unease, the sense that we were not alone. Ignoring her, Mike began, "They say this house was once the site of a gruesome massacre. A family lived here, and one night, they were all brutally murdered by an unknown assailant. The killer was never found, and some say the spirits of the family still haunt this place, seeking revenge." A chill ran down my spine as he spoke. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the night, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move near the house. Shaking it off as my imagination, I laughed nervously. "Nice try, Mike, but we're not falling for it." As the night wore on, we shared more stories, jokes, and memories. Eventually, exhaustion got the better of us, and we retreated to our tents. The sounds of the night filled the air, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, and an occasional owl hooting in the distance. I woke up sometime after midnight, the world around me eerily silent. I lay still, listening, trying to pinpoint what had disturbed my sleep. There it was again, a faint whisper, just beyond the edge of my hearing. I strained to catch the words, but they were too soft, too elusive. I unzipped my tent and stepped outside. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape. The house loomed in the distance, dark and foreboding. As I approached it, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Help us," they seemed to say. "Find us." I shivered, my breath visible in the cold night air. Gathering my courage, I stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking under my weight. The front door was slightly ajar, and with a gentle push, it swung open, revealing a darkness that seemed to swallow the light. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay and something else. Something metallic. Blood. My heart pounded in my chest as I explored the rooms, each one revealing more signs of a violent struggle. Broken furniture, shattered glass, and, most disturbingly, dark stains on the floorboards. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the empty halls. I turned a corner and froze. There, standing in the moonlight streaming through a broken window, was a figure. At first, I thought it was one of my friends, but as I got closer, I realized it was translucent, barely there. A ghost. It was a woman, her eyes filled with sorrow and rage. She reached out to me, her mouth moving as if to speak, but no sound came out. I took a step back, my mind racing. The legend was true. The spirits of the murdered family were still here, trapped in their own personal hell. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a scream. I turned and ran back outside, my heart in my throat. The campsite was in chaos. Sarah was standing by the fire, her face pale as she pointed towards the house. I saw them. They're real. Before I could respond, the whispers enveloped us, more distinct now. "Leave this place," they demanded, "or suffer the same fate." We didn't need to be told twice. Grabbing only what we could carry, we fled, not stopping until we reached the safety of our cars. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house, its dark silhouette fading into the distance. The whispers still echoed in my mind, a chilling reminder of our encounter. None of us spoke on the drive back, each lost in our thoughts. The events of that night left a mark on us, a shared secret that we never discussed, but always remembered. Every summer, when the days grew long and the nights warm, I couldn't help but think back to that abandoned house in the field and the spirits that still lingered there. The city is my home. The constant hum of traffic, the neon lights on flashy high-rises, the noisy crowds. I was used to living in all of it. When summer vacation came, I was packing to go home. My parents insisted that I spend time with my grandparents, thinking that a few weeks of fresh air and open spaces would do me good. Grandparents' house stood in a small, forgotten village, surrounded by vast, silent fields that seemed to stretch into infinity. The journey there was long and tiresome. The bus ride through winding roads, the landscape changing from urban sprawl to verdant greenery. By the time I arrived, the sun was setting, casting an eerie glow over the old house that stood at the edge of those endless fields. My grandparents greeted me warmly, their faces lined with years of hard work and love. I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt for my reluctance to visit. Their joy was genuine, and I resolved to make the best of my time here. But something about the house and its surroundings felt off, like a discordant note in an otherwise perfect symphony. The first few days passed. I helped my grandparents with their chores, wandered through the village, and tried to enjoy the simplicity of rural life. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was a subtle, creeping sensation, like an itch at the back of my mind. I chalked it up to city paranoia and tried to dismiss it. One evening, I decided to explore the fields. The sky was a deep, rich blue, the sun dipping below the horizon, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of summer flowers. I walked aimlessly, letting my thoughts drift, until I stumbled upon an old, abandoned farmhouse. It stood in the middle of the field, its windows dark and empty, its wooden boards warped and cracked with age. Curiosity got the better of me, and I approached the farmhouse. As I neared, a chill ran down my spine. The air seemed to grow colder, the light dimmer. I pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The interior was a mess of broken furniture and peeling wallpaper. But what caught my eye was a series of old photographs scattered on the floor. The photos were black and white, depicting a family, a man, a woman, and 2 children. Their faces were solemn, almost haunting. One photo in particular stood out. It showed the family standing in front of the very farmhouse I was in. But there was something strange about it. In the background, in one of the windows, was a shadowy figure. Its features were indistinguishable, but it was clearly there. a sudden sense of dread washed over me, and I hurriedly left the farmhouse, running back to my grandparents' house as fast as I could. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of the shadowy figure haunted my thoughts, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The story, combined with my own experience at the farmhouse, left me restless. Sleep came fitfully, and when it did, it brought nightmares. I dreamt of the farmhouse, of the shadowy figure in the window. It watched me, its presence malevolent and suffocating. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing at the foot of my bed. But when I blinked, it was gone. A sudden noise made me jump. I turned, and for a split second, I thought I saw the shadowy figure standing in the doorway. My heart raced, and I stumbled back, dropping the photo. The figure moved closer, and I could feel its cold, malevolent presence. Panic took over. I called out loud to my grandparents. My grandparents looked at me with concern. "What happened?" my grandfather asked. "You've stirred something. Don't worry, we'll sleep together tonight. But you have to leave tomorrow," he said gravely, when I explained. I left the countryside the next day, hoping it was over. But even now, back in the city, I can't escape the feeling that something is still watching me. The shadows seem darker, the silence heavier. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear my name whispered, just like in those silent fields.